Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining me for another video. Joe here with Tufel Gun and Armory, and today's video is going to be a detailed disassembly and reassembly of the Taurus Model 856 revolver. First things first, you want to make sure there's no ammo anywhere in the workspace. Since we're working with springs and other compressed parts, going to have your iPro on, and you want to make sure that the firearm itself has no live ammunition either, which it does not. So we are good there. Before we get into the disassembly, I want to discuss reference tools. There are a lot of reference tools out there that can help you get by, similar to this video, that is always good to have on hand when you're taking on a job such as this. One of them that's tried and true through the years is Shooter's Bible. It is going to have most of your mass-produced, or at least the original models mass-produced firearms in here. It's going to have exploded views. It's going to have pictures, step-by-step instructions. If you're struggling with a part name, it's going to have numbers next to that part on the exploded view and a list, and whatever number on the list is going to be that part name for if you have to look up replacement parts or anything like that. Really good resource to have. It's like $20 or $25 on Amazon. So reference tools are always good to have at your disposal when you're taking on a job like this. The next thing I wanted to discuss is the tools that you need. You don't need many for this particular job. You will need a block of some sort. Not necessary, makes things super convenient. So that way, whenever you are taking out the roll pin in the grip, you're not just hammering right into the workbench. You actually have the firearm elevated, and you can push the pin out, the roll pin out easier. So that is going to help out there. You also want an appropriately sized screwdriver for the screws on it. This is the Grace G2 from Grace USA. You don't need this exact one. Any appropriately sized flathead will do. You want a 1/8 roll pin punch and hammer for this. The hammer is going to come in handy for another part as well. So you want to make sure you have those. Some sort of pinching tool, needle nose pliers. These have never let me down. These are slip ring pliers, and while it's not exactly what they're used for, it works pretty darn efficiently. So get yourself some form of pinching tool for small components. So, and then the last thing, just purely out of convenience, I'll get more into it later. You're going to want either safety pins, or I actually use picture frame nails. They come in a box like this for like $5 on Amazon, and you'll never run out of them. So just grab a couple, use them, put them right back in, and you'll be fine. So now the moment that we've all been waiting for, we're going to actually go into the disassembly. The first part of the disassembly is to remove the grip. The grip on this particular model is covering up two of these side plate screws. The side plate screws are actually going to be on this side. So you got one right here, and this is actually holding in the spring and plunger for the cylinder as well. And then you're going to have two screws under here, which I'll show you in a few, but they are covered up by the grip. So you need to remove the grip in order to remove those screws so you can take off the side plate and access everything inside. So we will do that now. Taking your 1/8 roll pin punch, you're going to position the revolver onto the block, and literally all you're going to do is hammer it through. There we go. Perfect. All right. So that roll pin is out. You can see this is going all the way through, holding that on the same way the roll pin would. For part retention, just make sure you are keeping your space organized. setting it out. A lot of people like to set it out in order of how you take it apart so you know what's the next part to go back in. Once that roll pin is out, the grip literally just slides off, just like so. And we're going to set that grip aside. And then you have the side plate screws revealed. So you can take these out now. And if you haven't used a screwdriver before, this is probably not the channel for you. Taking out screws is pretty self-explanatory. One thing to note, with this first screw, you will notice that the inside is hollow, and that is because that is the one that houses that spring and plunger. They are very small, and once you take out that screw, I'll show you it in a second. Once you take out that screw, just flip the revolver over into your hand, and you will have it out right there. But that's both the plunger and the spring right in my hand there. Super, super small. And for retention, just put it right back into that screw the same way which it came out, which is the plunger side down, spring towards the screw. So that was the first one. The one that we had discussed earlier, saying that it was holding in that plunger and spring. So that is that first screw. Now we can take out these other screws. They're not holding anything in, so that's just removing the screws. Set those aside in the same fashion. And now we are ready to take off the side plate. It is very important that you don't pry the side plate. A lot of these parts are super thin, and as such, if they bend, they will never look right. Some of them might not go back into place perfectly, and you may have to start replacing parts far earlier than you really want to. So what you do is, holding the revolver in hand like so, take a non-marring tool, in this case the handle of the hammer works just fine, and tap on the surface of the grip where we just took that grip off, the surface of the frame where we just took that grip off. And it doesn't need much, but you will have to hit it with a little bit of force, and see, just like that, the side plate popped out, and we can remove the side plate from the firearm. With that side plate removed, you can now see all of the innards of the firearm. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and pull the cylinder out just to make it easier to view. But you have access to everything on the inside of the firearm here. So now that you have that plunger and spring removed from here, you can actually remove the cylinder from the firearm. Be careful when you are doing this to retain this pin and spring right here. So let me set down the gun real quick. Okay. So this pin and spring right here can come out if you're not careful. So make sure that's retained there. Let me give you a little bit of a close-up of it. So this is the spring that comes out, just like that. When you're removing the cylinder from the firearm itself, it can catch onto the opening and pull out. It's happened to me twice. Luckily, doing it slowly, slow, smooth as fast, it will, you'll most of the time catch it, and you won't have to be looking for parts. So, okay, the next part is to remove this right here. This is going to be holding in your hammer and sear, and you need to be able to remove the hammer and sear to remove everything else. So with that being said, you're going to push the cylinder release to the rear. This will essentially imitate if the cylinder was still in the firearm. And so you're just going to push it to the rear and then cock the hammer back. Oh, hang on. There we go. Just like that. And so now that you have your hammer cocked back, this is compressed. This spring is compressed, and you have a tiny little hole right here. And that's where those nails come in. So what you're going to do is put the nail through that hole, or safety pin, or whatever you are working with, just like so. And you are going to release that hammer and bring it back forward. And what that's going to do is it is going to remove this spring, remove tension on the spring, because you're keeping that spring depressed, but the method in which it's depressed is no longer putting pressure on it. So that nail, just like so, is holding it compressed. This will also make it easier when you go to reassemble it. You're not fighting the spring while you're trying to put it back in. So this can be set aside now. So after we've pulled out that first spring for the hammer, the next part is to remove the spring with the trigger right here. So we're essentially going to do it the exact same way. We're going to pull back on the cylinder lock, and we're going to cock the hammer. And doing that is going to remove the tension on the trigger. And as you can see, the spring is compressed, and there's a little notch right here, right on the back side of it. That little notch right there has a hole right there. I don't know if you can see it. That hole right there at my fingertips. So that hole right there is going to house one of those screws for the retention, one of those nails, just like so. Right here, just push the nail through that hole behind that block. And now at this stage, you can bring the trigger back, bring the hammer and trigger back, and it will remove the tension that is on that spring while keeping the spring retained. Remove the tension off the assembly while keeping the spring retained. And at this point, all you're going to do is that block is in a little notch right here. And this notch, all you need to do is kind of punch it out, but you don't even have to do that. It all depends on the use of your, it all depends on how much your firearm's been used, how lubricated it is, and you can get through and punch that out. And once you punch that out, the spring and the assembly is literally just going to fall out into your hand, just like so. And this is going to go behind the trigger. Let me see if I can get a solid view on it. This lighting is really terrible. So that notch right here is what goes in that side right there. And it sits flat, just like so. The next part is to remove the hammer. So you want your hammer in a half-cocked position, because what you're going to do right here is you want to kind of angle it in a way that, let me grab the screwdriver to point it out. So this, your sear right here is kind of up underneath the hand. And in order to remove the hammer, you need to have that positioned in such a way that it will move past that little cutout right there. So go ahead and pull this back. And then all this hammer is held onto it right now is this nipple right here that is attached to the frame, and right here. So once you get this into position, you can literally just shimmy this off of this nipple, shimmy the hammer off of this nipple, and remove it from the firearm. So I will do that now. I'll try to have it back here so you can kind of see, but we are going to do that right now. Okay, so just like that. You will want to kind of take this, and you may have to push in ever so slightly on the sear itself. Let me hold it up like this to show you. So if you're looking at the firearm, it's down flat like this. But basically what I'm doing is I'm using this screwdriver to push the sear in ever so slightly to get it past that metal hand in the revolver. And then it slides off that nipple that goes through this hole in the hammer. So we can set that aside now. Next is going to be the removal of the hand itself. One thing to note on the, we're actually going to do a couple of things here, but one thing to note at this stage is the hand is affected by the trigger. So this little peg right here, let me get this peg right here is holding in the trigger spring behind the trigger. Okay, there's a plunger and a spring behind that inside the trigger, and that is being held into place by this hand. There is another little peg just above it that actually goes inside the metal of the trigger. And manipulating the trigger is what moves that up and down. So those contents are under pressure. So you want to make sure to take off the hand slowly. But the way your hand is positioned, not this hand, your actual hand, you'll be taking it apart. Something similar to this when you're pulling it out, and you can just take it out by hand, but your finger will be back here, so your finger will act as a stop to stop that pin and spring from shooting across your shop. So you want to use your fingernail, your hand, whatever, to move the top of the hand to the rear, just like so. And once it is past this part of the frame, you can literally just pull it out by hand, straight up out of the gun. So just like so, keeping your finger back there. So that kind of came out a little bit quickly. So the spring and pin came out. You can set those aside and put them right back into the trigger, but they did come out and you need to be careful not to lose those. So the hand is out. That is that next step. And at this point, you have the transfer bar, the trigger, and the cylinder stop. Sorry. Transfer bar right here, trigger, cylinder stop. And you want this cylinder stop up through the bottom of the firearm to be able to release that trigger. You're going to need the trigger to be kind of angled backwards so you can have this gap right here, so you can get it out, and you'll see it. It's kind of a bad angle, but you'll see it. Once you have that gap, you can just pull it straight up out of the revolver. But you need to make sure that the cylinder stop is pushed up and out of the way. You see the cylinder stop is just kind of in there. So gravity is going to be gravity, and it's going to pull it down. And you want to make sure that you have it up and actually out of the way of the trigger. This is so much easier to do when the firearm is laying down and you're actually working on it, because gravity won't have an effect on that up and down motion. You can just kind of push it up out of the way, and it'll stay there. So, well, there goes the transfer bar. That was my next point. The transfer bar sits underneath the trigger, but as part of the trigger mechanism. This nipple right here will go in there. I'll show you how it works when I pull the trigger out. But there's really nothing holding these together with nothing else in here. So the with the hand being gone, and with the hammer and sear being gone and everything else like that, this is kind of just sitting in there, all reliant on the trigger. And since the everything is taken off, your trigger can shimmy a little bit sideways, just like so, which could dislodge this before the next step. So this is the next step. I will show it to you. I'll put it back in the firearm and show it to you. I'm going to go ahead and take the trigger out and then place it so you'll see exactly where it's sitting. So okay, as you can see, I'm literally just pulling. I got both hands on the trigger, both my finger and thumb, and just pulled it straight up out of the firearm once it was past that cylinder stop. Now the cylinder stop is still in there. That is just a pull out part as well. The easiest way to do it is to use your pinching tools, and it's basically like playing the game operation. So you're gonna make sure that it's down out of the cylinder, out of where the cylinder sits. You're gonna want to make sure it's down, and then you can really just yank it out just like that. Don't yank, be smooth with it, but it literally just pulls out just like so. So go ahead and take that out just like that. And now that cylinder stop is removed, and you can set it right next to your trigger. Now, before I forget, it's exactly why retention is so important, the transfer bar. So the transfer bar literally just sits in the firearm, attached to only the trigger. Because as you pull the trigger, it's going to move up and down. And I'll get more into this during the reassembly. But it literally just sits in this little cavity, just like so. And moves up and down in front of and, down out of the way of that firing pin, which is what we're going to be taking off next. So go ahead and pull that transfer bar out of the way, set it over next to your trigger. And now there is this little pin right here that is holding in the firing pin. Let me see if I can get better. There we go. So this pin right here is holding in the firing pin. Just like so. This one is holding in that one. So there's nothing holding it in. Most of the time, if you flip the revolver over, it's just going to fall out. Can be bad for retention since it's only like super tiny. So I just play operation again and pull it out just like that. And you have that pulled out. And now your firing pin can come out with no trouble at all. That's going to be your firing pin. So as it sits in there, you're going to see there's like a little half moon notch. So that is going to go down during the reassembly, and I'll get more into that. But that's going to go down because that pin goes through it and holds it in place that way. So I'm going to go ahead and set it next to that pin. And at this point, the only other thing left on this firearm to take off is going to be the cylinder stop itself. Just for instructional purposes, I will go ahead and do that. It is not necessary 99.9% of the time. And you're just going to take that screwdriver and unscrew the screw that is holding it in place. So that screw is loose, and you can just pull the whole assembly out, set that aside, and then the other part you have to access from the inside, and it is another spring-loaded part. So you have that spring right there, and it's this assembly. You can kind of see the horizontal lines right here. It's this assembly, and this little piece right here. Let me find a better angle. This piece right here, all the way back to that spring. It's all one part, and literally just pulls out with your fingertip. It is, like I said, it is under a slight spring load, so be careful when you're trying to retain those springs and whatnot. But that has the notch on the back that holds. So when the cylinder is in the firearm, when you have the cylinder up, it's going to press against this notch right here, and it's going to push this whole assembly back. And that's how the cylinder release works, because you have to push the cylinder release forward to release the cylinder and allow that cylinder to fall. But when the cylinder is in place, just normal, you're out on the range, or you just have it closed, in storage, this is actually going to be pushed to the rear because of that cylinder and that little notch. And that little notch goes right into the back, right here in that little hole. So now at this point, we have an entirely disassembled Taurus Model 856. The only thing that we haven't done, which is completely unnecessary because this is a brand new and unfired firearm, is removal of the barrel. I will not be doing that because there is no need, and that could be a video for a different revolver at a different time. So now for the reassembly, super easy. Just work your way back. As I said before, you can kind of lay out your parts as you take them out, and then just work backwards. And that's the order in which you need to put it back in. That being said, there are a couple of parts that you're going to want to kind of do somewhat of a function check to just make sure everything's in there and everything's moving and jiving correctly. And I will stop at those parts. So there's not much holding the spring on this first part, part of the cylinder stop. So you're going to want to kind of use both hands and kind of set it back down into that groove. And put a little bit of pressure on the spring so you can shimmy that notch back into the front right there. And it is right here. Okay. And that part's in. Now we can go on the other side and we can put the cylinder stop back in. Another pro tip is to, when you're working with fine screws like this, this I learned from an instructor, you want to do a quarter turn backwards just to get it into threads. And this just helps to avoid cross threading, because if you cross thread these screws, it is, I mean, it's almost monetarily wise worth it to just get a whole new firearm. Especially one like this, that is only a few hundred. So be careful when you're putting those screws in. Obviously, it's best to have a qualified gunsmith work on your firearms if you don't have the knowledge or tools to do so. However, that's neither here nor there. It's your decision ultimately as the owner. So the next part is going to be that transfer bar. And we're going to put that transfer bar, set it in there like so. And the next part is going to be the cylinder stop. And that cylinder stop is going to go exactly the way you had it, right into the fold. So here are both of them. I'm going to kind of hold the transfer bar so you can see both of those are put in back the way you had them. And then that cylinder, or that transfer bar, is just sitting in there for when I put the trigger on. That little nipple will go into the trigger. So trigger going in. Now, just before I put the trigger in, so this hole right here is going to go onto the nipple that is shared with the cylinder stop. And then this one right here is going to be the transfer bar on one side, and it's going to be that that hand on the other side. And I will get into that once I get the trigger in and get to those pieces, but I'll be able to show you where they're going to be sitting. So you got this one that's going to share that with the cylinder stop, and you got this that's going to share it with the hand and transfer bar. So the same way you put it in, kind of half cocked to where this is a 90-degree angle, so you can get it past that cylinder area. Not quite 90 degrees, but, and then you're going to just follow it down. You'll have to move, you might have to move the cylinder stop out of the way. You might have to move the cylinder stop out of the way, depending on how much you've been moving the firearm around. But it just slides on. And that's the fun thing about revolvers, is revolvers are very mechanically based and mechanically timed. And they are just like so. Okay. So I'm holding it into place so we don't have that transfer bar issue happen again. But you got the transfer bar sitting in that hole right there, and you got that front hole being shared by the cylinder stop as so. And so when you move it, the transfer bar goes up and down just like so. But what I was saying was the revolvers are so fun because they're really not held together by anything other than themselves. They are very precisely machined on that front to where if there's something out of alignment or there's something not sized correctly or whatnot, you could have a whole mess of problems because it may push something a little bit farther or it may not push it enough. All the parts inside the revolver work together in such a way that they're all held together by each other to serve the same purpose. So the next part, now that we have the trigger, the cylinder stop, and the transfer bar in, you're going to want to put the hand back on. And the hand is going to go this small notch right here is going to be the one that goes into the trigger. And this longer one is going to be the one that holds in the spring and pin behind the trigger. Now, a lot of times that pin and spring won't come out. I actually forgot it did come out. So I just reminded myself, got to put it back in. But that is going to go right, let me see if I can, right here in this hole behind the trigger. So there's a hole right here that pin and spring is going to go into, and the hand is going to hold them in place when you go to put the it back on. So just slide that pin and spring first, then the pin into the back of the trigger like so. You can see it right there. And then you're going to put the hand on. Be careful when working with the hand. You're going to have to kind of use the longer notch to hold that pin in and swing the smaller one up over the trigger. Sounds a lot more difficult than it is. Your main concern with this is to not allow the spring and pin to shoot, because you're essentially pushing down on the pin and spring, which is then spring loading it. So if that pin slips past that little notch, that pin can go flying. So be careful that it doesn't happen. Yep, see. Happens to the best of us. Pin came out. I'm gonna put it back in. And then just like so. Okay. So now you can see, got the hand in, but you can see that pin is right there, and it is held in place by that long notch on the hand, on the bottom of the hand. And then that secondary one actually went into the trigger, and so now when you're working the trigger, you're moving up the transfer bar and the hand. So obviously with the other parts in there, it's not going to go all the way unless you pull the cylinder stop back. Then you can move it all the way and whatnot. But just for checking, it's doing everything it's supposed to do. So now, while we're at this spot, we are going to put back in the firing pin and the pin that goes along with it. Once again, make sure that notch in the back of the firing pin is facing downward, as this pin you're going to drop right back into the firearm, and it is going to push into that groove and hold the firing pin in place, just like so. So you have the firing pin being held in place once again by that notch right there, that pin. So now we can put the hammer back on, and the hammer is going to go in the same way you took it out. You will have to move the sear in just so slightly. Once that sear is in, you can just push it down into the firearm. So just like so, you have that all in place and all working properly. So obviously it's only going to go half cock unless you actually pull the cylinder stop to the rear. But the all of the pieces are working together, and that's basically what you're looking for to see. So the next part you're going to do is you're going to put the second spring assembly that you took out. Pardon me, it's been a long day. I can't think of the name at the moment, but it's the one that goes behind the trigger, and you're going to put that back into the notch right here. So it is going to, if the trigger is back to the rear, you can see a there we go. When the trigger is back to the rear, you can see this little groove right here. And that little groove has an indention in the middle of it that ball-shaped end is going to fit into. And when it fits in there, this notch on the bottom will slide right into that hole right there. One of these days, I'm going to get a tripod so I can prop my phone or whatever up above me, or get a set of those, meta glasses or whatever, so you can see what I'm seeing. And it will be just a better angle altogether. So you can kind of see I'm doing double right now, so I can doing it down, and then I'm lifting it up, and it's just a little bit on the difficult side. So now that you have all that taken out, you can pull out that pin, and then as you release the hammer and the trigger, that spring is going to come back uncompressed and give that trigger the proper tension that it needs. So now it's got that tension again, and it's not just hanging. So the next part is going to be that the one for the hammer. Now this one is kind of not difficult. It has to work in a certain way, and I'm going to show you that right quick. So this first notch I'm going to show you is where this ball-shaped one is going to go into, right? Okay, so that is going to go into this notch on the bottom of the trigger. Let me see if I can find it. Right here. That notch. Let me get better light. That notch right there. Okay? So it's going to sit in here like so. But if you notice, when it's sitting up there, it's not held on to anything down here. It's not long enough because you have it compressed. So what you're going to do is, keeping it in place right here, you're going to slowly cock the hammer. And in order to do that, actually, you know what? We can go ahead and put the cylinder in. But if you didn't have the cylinder in place, what you would do is you would pull that cylinder release to the rear so you can bring the hammer all the way back. And as you bring the hammer back, it's pushing down this spring, and you can literally push it into place just like so. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and put the cylinder in. You can do it either way, but just to make things easier for this video, I know it's running a little bit long. Your cylinder, this part is just going to slide right back into this hole in the front. You will have to kind of make sure make sure the cylinder is like has enough space, or else it won't slide back in all the way. Sometimes you have to jimmy it, a little bit one way or the other, to get it past the metal of the frame. But once it's flush, just like so, you can move the cylinder back up into its space, just like so. So now that the cylinder's back in, you can literally just pull back and operate the hammer just the same way. But once again, safety is paramount. You don't want to make sure that no random rounds have somehow teleported into those chambers. Because now you do have an operational firing pin, you do have an operational hammer, an operational trigger, and everything like that. So when you're doing this next part, you want to make sure it's clear. Okay? And so you have that next part, and you're going to, I could actually do this one to show you. So in the bottom of the frame where it goes, there's a very set place that it'll sit into, just like so. So now it is flush in its house right here. And you can either hold it like this and then pull the hammer back, kind of guiding it up into that notch in the back of the hammer, or you can do it from the hammer side, right here. And as you pull down the hammer, you can kind of lower it down into that notch. Totally your call. Either way, as long as you guide it into the proper place, and when you release or when you pull out that nail, it doesn't fall apart on you. So we're just going to do it like this. Going to hold it down into its spot here. And then as I move the hammer back, it's going to go right up into that notch, and then the hammer's pulled back. Now, if you notice, the spring is now compressed even more. This little notch is right here. It's in its house. It's flush. This ball-shaped end is up in its notch in the hammer. And now I can pull out that nail. And I'm going to actually push it out from the other side. But now I can pull out that nail, and it is done. So now when I release the trigger and release the hammer, it is set in place just like this. And from here, we can do our final check to make sure everything's working right. You don't want to bring it back, pull the trigger, bring it back. Bring it back. end, I think. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so just making sure everything stayed in place. Thought something had fallen out there for, a bit, which is more common than not because, like I said earlier in the video, there's nothing holding any of these things in except for themselves. So they can get a little bit wonky when you have the side plate off. Once the side plate's back on, it'll be fine. But, and then, but you got it. Everything's working great. As we saw. So everything's working perfectly fine. Gonna go ahead and release that. And now it's time to put the side plate back on. So on this particular model, you have a shelf right here. This is the inside of the side plate. Logoed side is the outside. You have a shelf, and that shelf goes up, right up next to the firing pin. So you're going to want to kind of move it into place in the top right there. And you're just going to it's almost like doing flooring. You're going to kind of put it in and then slide the bottom part into place. And don't force it, obviously, but you can kind of press it down and everything will go into place very smoothly. Like I said, you want to avoid bending the side plate at all costs. So make sure it's slow, make sure it's working right. Okay. Now, the first screw that I want to put back in is the plunger screw. And the reason why I want to put in the plunger screw first is the cylinder and everything is held into place with the plunger screw. So if you put that in first, then you can do any last minute checks or anything without actually having to. There we go. I'll go ahead and speed that up. I had a little bit of trouble there. Okay. So now we can actually go in, and since it's been off camera, as you can see, there's still nothing in this firearm. But you can go in, see that everything, it locks, everything works properly. Swings out, comes back into place. Good. Good. Single action. Double action. And we are good. Everything is in order. And now I'm going to put on those last two screws. And we're going to replace the grip. And from there, we'll have it fully ascended, fully reassembled. All right. And now that those screws are in, we can slide the grip back up onto the firearm, just like so. And now all you're going to do from here is do the exact opposite. Instead of putting the firing pin or the roll pin punch and pushing the roll pin out, we're going to be pushing the roll pin in. So that said, this is where the rubber grip comes in handy because you don't need an extra hand to hold it in place. And then I'm just going to gently tap on it with this to get it started. is started. I am actually going to all right, perfect. So now that we have special cameo by my father's old sales shooter's Bible that has current market rates for 30 years ago. So actually, I think probably like 20 years ago. But anyways, that's besides the point. Shooter's Bible also makes sales guides, value guides. So they have everything. Great resource. No, I am not in any way paid or endorsed by Shooter's Bible. So yes, that being said, that is the complete disassembly and reassembly of the Taurus Model A56. I hope my next video will feature some different camera angles that I can really get the camera down in there and show you exactly what I'm looking at, so you can see exactly what you're looking at. That is going to be another one of my goals for 2026, is to be able to invest back into the shop for making these videos as well as other stuff. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy this platform. And if you have any questions, comments, go ahead and drop them in the comment box below. Be sure to like and subscribe. It's the best way that we can grow together. And with that being said, y'all have a good night. See you next time.